Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real honour. I'm just sorry I'm not with you, and I hope you're having a wonderful time sharing ideas and socialising. What fun that would be! So enjoy it. I've been a supporter of Napo and a supporter of the trade union movement for decades now, and it's a particularly important time, I think, for trade unions, showing how we can work together, because it is a time of rampant individualism, and that your collectivism and working professionally together is incredibly important. The Howard League itself has supported the installation, the initiation of probation over 100 years ago, looking back at our annual report. So I'm very pleased to be part of this, as I'm coming up to retirement in a couple of weeks after many decades of working in the field. I'm going to talk first about prisons, because that's obviously the sort of heart of the work of the Howard League, and to a certain extent the heart of the work of Napo and probation, because you work in and with prisons, but also you take the flak after the damage has been done, in a sense of imprisonment. And of course, the deprivation of liberty is the most serious punishment available to our system. It's the most serious, the most devastating, but we mustn't forget that probation too is a restriction of liberty. So we think it's time. I'm going to try and be positive if possible, which is always difficult in this field, but I think it's time to rethink. We were promised a white paper on prisons. I'm not sure that's going to happen now. Who knows? Now we've got this new Secretary of State who doesn't seem particularly interested in prisons and probation, but we'll see. But we just don't know what that's going to include at the moment, or whether it will require legislative change, or whether it's just going to be practice change, or what it will be. But the Howard League's view is that prisons, particularly, should only be a very small part of a small system. That punishment itself and the criminal justice system is, in a sense, an admission of failure. It's a failure to victims, it's a failure to the system and to society. But because of that, it is all the more important that principles of justice and fairness should be at the heart of the criminal justice system. There's some kind of, I suppose it's sort of ironic that I think that prisons in particular, because they're the harshest and most extreme element of the criminal justice system, should themselves be the epitome of justice. We know they're not, but they should provide consistency, impartiality, respect, fairness, and they should epitomize justice. So what we've developed is a 10-point plan looking forward. I put it on my blog, and I wrote in a letter to the new Justice Secretary. I have yet to get a reply. And our plan is looking forward. If he's going to have a white paper, if he's going to do something radical about the problem at the heart of the justice system, this is what he should do. He should stop the prison expansion programme. There should be legal limits on the population that each prison can hold, over which it cannot take anybody else. They should end the use of prisons for profit, and there should be an investment in the existing prisons within the public sector. And that's just point one. So I'm going to go through the others quite quickly. We should reduce the prison population by at least half. I haven't put a number on it, but I think that we should, I hate to say take advantage of the chaos and the misery that's been caused by COVID, but actually the number of men, women and children in prison has gone down. We should take advantage of that and continue it, so that we start, we look at least halving the prison population, but probably more. And we should start planning for reintegration immediately that people are received, and working with families and working with purposeful activities. It's been shocking that people are still being locked up almost all day, all night, week after week. And when the rest of the world the rest of the country has moved on, and we are socializing, as indeed you are, and yet most prisons are still virtually in total lockdown. Third point is stopping the use of prison for people with serious mental ill health. and we should improve the health and well-being of people who are detained. And that involves health services being delivered by the NHS and not commissioned out, and not keeping the recommissioning, just let's have consistency. And that would be helpful in reducing down and driving down self-injury and deaths in custody. The Howard League gets notification of every individual who dies in prison from whatever cause. So that's basically, we get a notification every day. It's absolutely heartbreaking to see the details of how people are dying in prison, and we have to reduce that to an absolute minimum. The fourth point is reduce the number of Black and ethnic minority people in the penal system. Equality of outcomes should be rigorously monitored and pursued throughout the whole penal and criminal justice system. There is racism in the system. It's not disproportionality, it's racism. And it's particularly a problem in the courts. And that should be addressed, because if people are coming, if we have a disproportionality in the prisons, that's because there's racism in the courts, and that needs to be addressed. We need to close the failed young offender institutions and the last secure training centre, and there's only one left standing now, and use, and if there are for the small number of children who require custody, use the local authority run secure children's homes. Very, very few children require penal custody, but the local authority run homes are proven to be at least adequate and reasonably safe, whereas the privatised secure training centres have been a disaster. They've been corrupt, financially corrupt, and of course abusing children, as if you read the report on the Rainsbrook and the G4S one that is still standing, it's absolutely shocking. For 30 years they've been abusing children for profit. The sixth point is closing women's prisons and introducing very small local residential units for the tiny number of women who commit crimes serious enough to merit a custodial sentence. And it would be handfuls, really just handfuls. Local units very similar to the local authority run secure units for children could be had for women, but the vast majority of women simply should not be in prison at all. The seventh point is curtailing the power to remand people to prison and introducing the possibility of individuals applying to court for compensation if they're found not guilty. I don't think it can be automatic, but people who've been held in prison, sometimes for months, and of course at the moment the remand population is going up and people are spending months and months and months in prison awaiting trial, and if they're found not guilty at the end of that, they should be allowed to get compensation. The eighth point is abolishing unfair and inconsistent practices, such as the imposition of additional days of imprisonment. Now, the Howard League's been working on this for some years now. We looked at the system in Scotland, where additional days are not given as punishment. They got rid of that system years ago, and yet we're still doing it. And hundreds of thousands of additional days of imprisonment are awarded for people for misbehaving or for not doing as they're told. And that has to stop, as well as do the arbitrary recalls, the grayling recalls. And I mean, every time you mention graylings, you know something's going to go wrong. And recalls that are not necessary. And I'm going to come back to that. We also want to see a reform of the prison officer role so that it's a profession with a proper career path, proper qualifications and proper training. In other countries do that. Other countries either have the prison officers who are properly trained and qualified, like in Norway, where it's degree qualified, or in places like Germany, where they split the role and prisons are run by professional psychologists, psychiatrists, teachers, and people like that. And prison officers are literally turnkeys. We have a hybrid system, and it's not good enough. We need to give prison staff the proper training so they can do a decent job. Finally, and something I feel very strongly about, is for those men, almost entirely men, who are going to spend a long time in prison, they need to have the opportunity to work. Not forced labour, but the opportunity to work. I know that the government's put a lot of effort and money into and they keep talking about opportunities for people on release. Well, that's fine, but we've got 30 or 40,000 men in prison who are going to be in prison for a very long time. And they need to do something while they're in prison. So they need the opportunity to earn some real money, the rate for the job, not the minimum wage, the rate for the job. They need to be able to have a proper relationship with an employer, even join a trade union. They should pay tax and national insurance, and they should be able to support and work with their families. And that's something that I've worked with. We ran a project, we ran a business inside Coldingley for a long time. So I've actually employed prisoners on a real wage. Now, I know this requires a lot of change. If you look at prisons today, they're pretty similar to how they were 100 years ago. It is time for change. I think, you know, if we have a decent Secretary of State who's got a bit of courage and a bit of nous, maybe he'll do it. Now, I just want to turn a little bit to probation, because after the disaster of Grayling, when he attempted to destroy probation and his rampant and failed privatisation, we are still left with some of the hangover of those problems from his time and his changes. One of the things is the fixed term recalls for short periods of time, and that creates huge problems, and it's something I'd like to get rid of. Because it causes problems for prisons. It's nonsense for the people who are recalled, and it's happening too often. I would like to see, whilst I'm pleased that the service has been reunified, that obviously is brilliant, but it hasn't. The structure doesn't allow for local autonomy. And it's under the control of HMPPS, which is dubious. So I think the local autonomy that we used to have in probation was really important, because it creates local links with other agencies, not just criminal justice agencies, but health services, voluntary organisations, local authorities, local communities. And I'm worried that that won't happen. Now, I know I'm looking back and I'm, you know, talking about remembering the time to advise, assist and befriend, but then I go back that far, so I'm not ashamed of it. I'm worried also that being a part of the civil service will hamper the voice of probation. So it's incredibly important that Napo speaks out. Your voice will be the voice of probation, because I don't expect ministers or HMPPS or the MOJ to speak out to be the champions of probation. So Napo is going to be incredibly important in the years to come. There are challenges. The risk aversion on the recalls, which is, as I've said, is tens of thousands every year. At any one time, there are over 10,000 people in prison who've been recalled. That's 12% of the prison population. That has to change. An example we have of you probably know that Howard League, as well as being a charity, also has a legal team, and we're representing a young lad who was released from prison and was put in a hostel, and because he didn't sign up at lunchtime, he was lying in his bed, because that's, you know, all people do, particularly in lockdown. He was breached and he was recalled, and he's been in prison since January because he didn't sign on. The staff knew he was there. He was upstairs in his bed. So we're trying to get him out again. I noticed that the inspector said there are disproportionate outcomes, particularly for Black, Asian and minority ethnic service users, have been identified in other parts of the criminal justice system, but they're not routinely monitored in relation to recall decisions. Recall is a continuing problem. So that's my little worry about it. I'm also worried about unpaid work, again, which is going to be national, not local, contracted out and not linked to local probation and other services, which is pretty much what happened with the CRCs. It's going to be subcontracted. There'll be some creaming off, and it'll be bureaucratic. And it will replicate some of the historic problems that I'm particularly worried about. And I see that people like the Canal and River Trust which again is divided into regions. It's not local, and other big national charities will be running this. I think it's going to be problematic. And I think unpaid work as a principle is valuable, but if it's run badly, it does more harm than good. I'm coming to the end. There was something. I did a session with Justin Russell recently, and in conversation, and I did a bit of lobbying with him because he doesn't inspect premises, the hostel premises, the approved premises. And I've written to him asking him to do that, and he still hasn't replied. People do usually reply to my letters, I have to say, but I'll make a fuss about this. He doesn't inspect what goes on, the fabric of the buildings, or outcomes. And I think it's important that that is part of the inspection process. Probation has done well on young adults and maturity. And that's been one of the great successes, the recognition that young adults and that they take time to mature, that young people are still forming their personalities and their skills. And that's been a great success, and we welcome that and we value that. And the Howard League has worked closely with probation officers representing young adults. We will be supporting probation in the future. Our young early career academic network bulletin in the new year is going to bring together academics and practitioners, and will be guest edited by Professor Lowell Burke. So I'm pleased that there'll be continuing work even after I've gone, working with probation. Finally, hope lies with you. If anything is going to change, it's probation that's going to drive that change. It's probation officers, and it'll be Napo speaking out for probation. It's your practice, your leadership that is going to provide the change. I'm leaving in 2 weeks, but I will keep in touch with you. I will keep supporting you, and be assured that the Howard League for Penal Reform will always be a friend of probation and of Napo. And thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Frances. Just before you leave us, Frances, as we know that you are stepping down from your role in the Howard League, it is my privilege to present you, on behalf of Napo, a certificate conferring on you honorary life membership of Napo.
Thank you.
This is to reflect the work that you have dedicated yourself to over many years, I know since 1986, because I looked it up, and the interest that you have shown to the importance of the welfare and care of children and the role of probation in the criminal justice system. Your willingness to criticise reforms to the system and to suggest improvements have been invaluable to probation members, especially when we were fighting transforming rehabilitation. We know that we will maintain the link with the Howard League and with your successor, and we hope that this honorary membership will serve as a reminder of the regard we have for you and the work that you have done for all in society. Thank you.
I'm deeply honoured. Thank you so much. It's lovely. Thank you.